I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the many lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Hi everyone, my name's Kathy and I'm pleased to welcome you here today. It's also wonderful to have Merril Jackson joining us. Many people living and working on the Central Coast are familiar with the Poppy Project, but not so familiar about how it came to be. Those bright red flowers have made such an impact on our community, not only visually, although they're certainly stunning both en masse and individually, but they've also raised community spirit, bringing people of all ages and walks of life together to create the flowers and displays, and also to view and reflect. The libraries were filled with the flowers both as a collection point for the packs and a drop-off location for completed flowers. These flowers have been a focal point in our community from 2015 up until today. Today is very different to 2015, and the way the poppies are displayed this year is very different. However, their purpose remains to remember them. Merril Jackson is the driving force behind these beautiful displays. She prefers to stay out of the spotlight, so we are especially pleased she's decided to share her story of the poppies and her memorial restoration work with us today. Welcome, Merril.
Thank you, Kathy. So we start our presentation. This is the beautiful picture that is one of my favourite images of the Terrigal Poppy project. So from here, let's find out why the Poppy project began. The idea to create a community-inspired Poppy project was conceptualised while undertaking a further university degree during research and a chance finding of an immemorial verse published in the Gosford Times in 1923. Written 7 years after the death of local Matcham soldier Cyril Henry Martin, this verse clearly defines the heartbreak and irreversible impact of war. These words deeply resonated with me. With this verse, the motivation behind creating something significant for the Central Coast, something that was community-led and grassroots. A commemorative event during the 100-year centenary of Anzac. I have not found another verse like this one, so it is likely one of the Martin family members wrote this piece, and I believe that it was Cyril's mother, Ellen, as she has listed her name before her husband's, and maybe indicative that it was written by her. Ellen Martin died 6 years after this poem was published, and it was unlikely she had an opportunity to visit her son's final resting place in France. He is buried away in France, and his grave we may never see. Will some kind friend in that distant land plant a flower on his grave for me? We still seem to see his smiling face through a mist of anxious tears, but a mother's heart part is a broken heart, which is meant to be heart, I think, and the burden of weary years. And it's inserted by his sorrowing mother and father. So the choice of flower for the Poppy project was firmly established for me, given that the red poppy is known as the Flower of Remembrance, a significance due to these flowers growing across the battlefields of northern France and Belgium after war ceased. With the moving poem In Flanders Fields by John McCrae having very special meaning to the Poppy project that most people do not know about. And I'll reveal this as we progress through the slides. The lines of the Martin poem, will come some kind friend in that distant land, plant a flower on his grave for me, was something we could do that I believed we could do collectively on the Central Coast. But it was always my hope, after, going through the Poppy project for so many years, that one day I would go and fulfil Ellen Martin's wish in planting a flower on her son's grave or placing flowers on her son's grave when I visited France, if ever I had that opportunity. So a little bit of background to the Martin brothers. These are the Martin brothers. They're football lads from Matcham, and they lived at Matcham and most likely with their parents. So the Martin brothers, Harold, down below on, I can actually use a little, can you see Mr. Snow is his name actually, Harold. Harold was known as Snow, and Cyril was known Henry, actually. And they were part of the 53rd Battalion. Snow and Cyril were involved in the deadly and disastrous Battle of Remembrance, where the AIF on 19th of July 1916, being the very first day of battle, were ordered to go over the top onto an open field in direct line of enemy fire, which was basically a suicide mission. Further to this story, family members have informed me that Cyril came across Snow wounded on the battlefield, and he stayed by his side until Snow urged Cyril to continue on. It was shortly after leaving Snow that Cyril was shot and wounded in the back and shoulder by a sniper. The Battle of Fromelles is well known for the comradeship of cobber mates in retrieving the wounded from the battlefields in the days following. Rescuers recovered around 300 wounded from the no man's land. One soldier carried a wounded companion from the field, so the story says, and as he was moving along the field, he heard someone call out, "Don't forget me cobber." Cyril and Snow were fortunate in being retrieved from the battlefield to receive medical assistance. Snow made it to England for hospitalisation and recovery and survived. And after he returned back onto the battlefield of the Western Front. However, Cyril died from his wounds. I'll just have a drink here. In a place called Wimmera, which is Wimmera, in northern France, August the 8th, 1916. In 2018, the opportunity of travelling to France actually gave me that opportunity to visit Cyril's grave, which is along the seaside. Before leaving, I visited Cyril's parents' grave at Wargrave and took 3 stones, very small stones, with me to place on Cyril's grave, one each for James, Ellen and Snow. Now, if you have a look at the cemetery picture here, you'll note, because I want you to note, that there's timber crosses and they're upright. So just remember that as we proceed onwards. So a little slide journey about the whole Poppy project for me. The journey from Fromelles to Wimmera for Cyril was most likely a different route than the one I took, and would have included a series of clearing stations along the way. I could not help think of the lengthy journey this would have been when injured. And it was actually quite hilly, which I thought, Fromelles is quite a flat landscape, but as you progress across where we did, it became quite hilly, and I was quite surprised about that actually. So close to the English Channel during the Great War, Wimmera was one of the several localities set up as a military hospital base, which had a large field hospital with stationary hospitals for Allied forces, which dotted across the coastal hillsides. Wimmera Communal Cemetery is located on the northern coastline of France, about 35 kilometres from Calais. While visiting Cyril's Henry's grave, I was also able to place a handmade poppy wreath from Gosford. The legacy ladies down there helped make this for me, and I just put it on a little wreath so I could put it on his grave headstone. So if you take note here, you'll see that this one's quite different than most Commonwealth war graves. It is a Commonwealth war grave, but this was quite unique. as in it's a communal cemetery, meaning that civilians are placed in that graveyard as well, which you can see up the back. Towards the back, you can see other grave headstones. And what you'll notice in this too was that the headstones are lying down. Now, there's a reason for that, is because it was on sandy foundation. They had to lay down the headstones for protections. So while I was visiting Cyril Henry's grave, I was able also to place a handmade poppy wreath from Gosford, from the ladies Mary and Joyce, on, I'll just see where that comes, on someone else's headstone, which was John McRae, who wrote In Flanders Field. And his headstone is not located very far away from Cyril's. So that was a very special moment for me. So Wargrave headstones, as you can see here, were very stylised very early after the Great War. And they were, as you can see, indicative of both these headstones. There were very strict uniformity in design, in lettering and layout. So on John McRae's, you can see the Canadian maple leaf. On ours, we can see our Australian Imperial Force imagery there. And this is on a wall in the cemetery grounds, which is what I showed first in the first part of this. So on to the poppy projects. So Gosford City Council were quite instrumental in getting it off the ground, the first one and the second one. So Gosford 2015 and Terrigal 2016, and I did have actually others planned for 2017 and 2018, but they were never realised. The first poppy project would never have eventuated had it not been for the support and belief in this project of one of our local councillors called the late Bob Ward, actually, and also the heritage officer at council called Rebecca Cardy. The Terrigal Poppy project was assisted by a beautiful lady called Sharon Drayton, and she was fantastic in assisting me in making that happen. So the Poppy project could never have been successful without community support of our libraries, as Kathy mentioned, and I needed quite a few people to make these poppies, so I did a lot of outsourcing to schools, to nursing homes, to volunteers. The generosity of corporate funding sponsors also helped produce these. There was just not one funding body, there was other people, small businesses, who gave to this project. To enable this to happen, I actually had to come up with a pattern to make, and there was a certain criteria for it to be able to withstand the weather conditions. So I had to cater also for all age groups. So it had to be able to be made by little, smaller children in primary schools up to people in nursing homes. Some considerations in the design and packaging to distribute some poppies were that it had to be waterproof, it had to be lifelike, and also even to produce it. So I actually, you see here, we had to make it into I've made up a thing that we'd make it into a sort of a firecracker so that the stakes would be concealed inside and not hurt anybody. That was, I was a former preschool teacher. That was one thing that really worried me endlessly, how safe they were. So, as you can see, this was the installation day for Gosford in 2015, where so many people from all across the coast came to help. The council helped with that one, and so many people came along to help. We even actually, I made sure that we had something to feed people that were at these installations where Master Food came along and made a barbecue for us. Singleton Butchery, they helped us too. So everyone was catered for at these poppy projects. So this is the first one in 2015. People comment, I always had a vision for something in the middle of the fountain, and unbeknownst to the council, I had actually planned some sort of poppy installation there as well. That the council had already commissioned the central poppy sculpture by Margaret Erling, Marguerite, I should say. So that's another image of the poppy project. That's actually after we had that bit of a cyclone hit and washed boats up on the side of the Broadwater. But the poppies remained standing straight. They, only a few of them were on the side, and we just fixed them up. But it was remarkable that they stood. So for people that didn't see the night shots of these, they were quite moving as well if you went of a night to see the poppies. So there's the Gosford one of a night and the Terrigal one of a night. So moving on to the Terrigal Poppy project. This one was on a much larger scale than Gosford, with 65,000 poppies displayed, being reflective of the amount of Australians lost to the First World War. It was a massive undertaking, and it covered the whole coast. It was a little bit different then. The councils weren't amalgamated, so it was really hard to sort of try to get up to the other end of the coast. But we did it, and lots of people from the Entrance and Wyong Shires all contributed. It was really lovely to have us all united as the Central Coast. There were strategic reasons. Some people don't understand. I remember somebody wasn't very happy that I moved it from Gosford to Terrigal. They were quite upset, but they didn't understand there were strategic reasons for the placement of these poppy projects for me. There was a reason behind it. And I wanted people to understand that the war moved locations, because so many people in the past have been tied to Gallipoli, and now the Western Front has become more prominent. However, people they just only concentrated on one place. So that is why the Poppy project for the 100-year centenary, I was going to move around the coast. So we had Gosford, and there was a reason why I had Gosford, which was the Broadwater, and that little cove there, or the Broadwater actually reminded me of Anzac Cove, but it also reminded me of a soldier by the name of Flem Campbell, who was Irvine actually, but his name, he was nicknamed Flem, not nicknamed, that was his middle name, and he lived in Gosford, and he was actually a clerk of Gosford Council for a while, and then he moved to Scone just before the war started. So he wrote a letter home from Lemnos, and it mentions in there about how beautiful the Brisbane water was, and how important, how it reminded him of home. So I thought I think we should start, because of the Gallipoli campaign started the war, we'll start where it looks like the Anzac Cove. Then it moved to Terrigal, and that was the reason for the Western Front. That's when the Western Front sort of started, and the men and nurses got off the boat on the coast of France. So I wanted a coastal location. The other areas I was going to do was Nora Head Lighthouse. I was one of them, and I wanted to have soldier projections up on the White House. And the reason for having it at the entrance was to represent the entrance soldiers, because I had a great uncle that actually was in World War I, and he came from the entrance. So I wanted to make sure that they were represented, and I wanted to make sure for the last year that Woy Woy Peninsula, who have a lot of street names after the war, I wanted to make sure they were represented too. I would have loved to have done one up at Mangrove Mountain because we had an awful lot of soldiers that came from there too. So that's, people mightn't have known that that's why the reason they moved locations. So special permission was given by the Veterans Affairs to use the word Anzac for this event. Many volunteers from all around the Central Coast assisted with the installation, with one group of volunteers, the Wargrave New South Wales Rural Fire Brigade, working all day and throughout all the different rain showers that we had to get the job done. I've never seen a harder working group of people in my whole life. They just did not stop. I kept telling them to come down to the tent and they just would not move. They wanted to get the job done. It was just remarkable. So some more from the Terrigal installation, some photos we took. And this was on the dismantling day, and we just had some people that come along and took some poppies. We gave lots of poppies away for that one. And that was just the poem by Ellen Martin. And that's at actually Terrigal Beach. So, as from the beginning of the Poppy project, the creation of the poppy nets that adorned the steps at Gosford War Memorial Park were a strategic consideration. And I deliberately started the poppy net just in case I wasn't able to raise the funding to do the complete years. So while the poppy projects didn't go ahead at Nora Head and at Woy Woy, at least the poppy meshes could go on, and which they did. So on this side of your screen, you'll see the poppy nets from the very first year in 2015 and what they look like. And this is what they look like in 2018. This was a photo taken in 2017 of the poppy nets. And as the poppy project developed, so did the colours to represent other people that were involved in war and animals. So the red were a tradition for the soldiers, to represent the soldiers. And the white poppies were included to represent the women, and the black poppies were to represent the Indigenous and Islanders and Aboriginal peoples of Australia. And the purple poppies were to do with the war animals and the horses that were involved in war. And then we had pigeons in the war, we had all sorts of animals. So they were designed originally for alongside the Gosford Memorial steps, and I wanted them to be versatile and that they could be used elsewhere after the Poppy project, because this is a living and ongoing commemorative piece that we made as a collective Central Coast people, and it's quite a historic piece now that we've made. So I wanted these nets to go on and be showcased all over the Central Coast on Remembrance Days. So it is my hope that the poppy nets are utilised by the Central Coast Council throughout the Central Coast in other years. For example, I did this year and last year, and the first one I did was at Kincumber 2019 for their Remembrance Day. And I did that specifically because the Kincumber War Memorial is the very first war memorial that was erected on the Central Coast, and it's within the school grounds at Kincumber. And I wanted to commemorate that was 100 years old. So we put it over at St. Paul's, which is that was a striking place to go around the roundabout and see. It was quite beautiful, actually. So this year, the poppy nets are in front of the old Christchurch Gosford and in front of the new display for its centenary. The memorial on the right here is the Celtic Cross War Memorial, and it turned 100 in August, late August. So which gets me on to the Celtic Cross War Memorial. This year is the centenary of this war memorial. Far more than just a civic monument from the past, a war memorial has the ability to evoke powerful responses of the enormous scale and human loss and devastation of war. A monument pertaining to place and people. From understanding why such memorials were erected to assessing their physical fabric and features and researching those named upon a memorial, each facet of a memorial's history enriches our knowledge of an understanding of a certain period in our collective histories. War memorials commemorating the First World War were erected using community subscriptions. They weren't government funded, they were actually fundraised for. So with me just saying that we learn so much about a war memorial, we can learn so much. Here is the Celtic Cross War Memorial, and it was actually created by Thomas Brown monumental masons from Maitland and Sandgate. Part of it was made in Sandgate. The top part here with the Celtic Cross and the panels here are actually made of trachyte, which is a volcanic mass. And the 3-stepped plinths down the bottom here, steps, were made of Ravensfield, from stone taken from the Ravensfield quarry, which was owned by Thomas Brown. What people don't know about this memorial is, and many memorials actually, but this one in particular, because this one was more about to the glory of God, and it was about faith and the importance of faith during wartime. And the 3 steps meant hope, charity, and faith. So in this picture we have Reverend Arthur Rennick. He returned to Gosford after he'd been here a bit before, but he returned on the 1st of October 1914, just when our men were leaving to go overseas. And his family, his wife there was Alice, and his little son here was Arthur. The baby is Charles, named after his brother, and the little girl is called Ruth. With the nappies in the background, I believe this is probably, and being 1920, 21, I believe this was at the rectory, behind the rectory. So here we have some images of just a third of the soldiers that are named on the Celtic Cross. The majority of men named on the Celtic Cross War Memorial died during the Western Front conflict, with 5 men a result of conflict on the Gallipoli Peninsula, 1 in Cape Town, South Africa, and 1 before he even left Australia. His name was Hitchcock, and he is lying in an unknown grave somewhere across the Pioneer Park site at Point Frederick. So these are the soldiers. So when the memorial was first erected, which you will have noticed in the other photo, it was erected towards the back near the rectory. There's a reason why that occurred actually, but it was relocated, and you can see it under the tree here on the side. War memorials has been my focus for some time now, and when memorials were erected, they normally had to go through a War Memorials Advisory Board, and if you had it on private land, you didn't actually have to follow the rules as much. So they still followed quite a few rules with putting this memorial in. It had to be in a prime spot, and for the church, the prime spot was going in and out of the church door. So that is why it was up near the rectory. It was between the rectory and outside the door of the Christchurch Gosford. And then across from there was the little St Mary's Virgin, the Virgin little parish church that was timber. And it was then used once this stone church came along for a Sunday school and for as a hall for a meeting and little groups and a women's guild and all sorts of things like that. So the memorial was removed during a time when they made the cremation niches. So after 100 years, the memorial was looking in a very poor condition, which was earlier this year. And due to this deterioration, I submitted a grant for its restoration. And I'm just awaiting the outcome of that grant. Hopefully we will receive the money to complete the restoration. So to enable, you can see how grimy it was. That's the good side, to believe it or not. That's the good side of the memorial. The other sides were quite worse than that. So to enable a complete restoration of the Celtic Cross Memorial, rather than me having to reapply for further grants along the way in stages over multiple years, my husband and I undertook a light conservation clean to the surface earlier this year, which I have had previous experience with and training to do. So if anyone is ever going to, I'll give you a tip, if you ever go to a cemetery and you want to clean a memorial or clean a grave site headstone, only use water. Never ever use a high pressured gurney or don't do any high pressure cleaning to it, because it actually just destroys the surface and destroys the fabric of the lettering and all sorts of things. So this was all done by hand, so with little toothbrushes and very soft brushes, just using water. The other thing that I might mention was with the memorials, I've had a lot of experience with one particular architect who was high up in studying this fellow that was to do with war memorials and in the World War I. And one of the reasons why they faced west was because the men went west, but also so that the sun could capture, just like it does in this one, and illuminate the monument. So then, so after researching the Celtic Cross War Memorial and learning the majority of men listed on the panels had no known grave site, and several being named upon the Menin Gate in Ypres at Belgium, made me think about the possibility of using the Menin Gate at midnight painted by Will Longstaff in 1927 as the inspiration for a new poppy project to commemorate the 100th year of the Celtic Cross War Memorial. I sort of could see that the light-coloured stone of the Christ Church would be a perfect backdrop to achieve this vision. So a little background, the helmets that you see were created by paper mache. And then I had a friend, a really good friend that from the past actually, we went to school together, could spray paint them so that they, many times, so that they'd be waterproof for me, and then I coloured them to make them be able to look a bit more like that Menin Gate at midnight painting. So the installation for our current one was last Sunday, 1st of November. We got there bright and early and we were able to do it before the church service started, so that was very good. So this is a picture of the current Poppy project and how much cleaner the memorial looks now. So these are some images of what you will see when you go to the site. Get out and have a look, and go up and have a look. It's actually quite beautiful. Some more pictures. And you'll see the poppy nets along here. And nighttime shots. That we actually had a lovely nighttime shot the other day. We went along and I was able to get Father Rod Bauer to put some lights behind the stained glass to illuminate that for the night. It's actually quite beautiful. This was our home with all the red poppies in it just recently. And this time during COVID times, I had to be very careful, and you will have seen in the picture on Sunday that I had everyone spaced out 2 metres apart so that we would be complying with the restrictions at the moment, and we had everything safely done. So it was a special morning actually, and it went very smoothly. And this is the result. This is what you'll see if you go now. And surprisingly, Cyril Henry Martin is actually on the Celtic Cross War Memorial as well. So that was a bit of a surprise for me. His name is on the memorial as Henry Martin. That was his, that's the name he chose to use, I guess. And his brother-in-law is on that memorial as well. And another friend from Matcham of his was on that memorial as well. So that is the end of the presentation, Kathy. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. That was just amazing to see the stories that go with the poppies that we see, but there's a lot of work behind the scenes, and you can see how much work that you've put into it and how much other people have helped you to create these magnificent displays. Now, does anybody in the audience have any questions? You can feel free to unmute your microphones if you would like to ask a question. If not, I have questions. I always have questions.
Oh, look, someone's, is there someone that, I don't know. Anyway, sorry, I just saw something flash on my screen.
Oh, I thought there might have been a message, but I can't see it yet. Maybe someone's typing at the moment. So I'll ask my question. What is your background when it comes to researching and restoring the memorial? So what's, have you got training in this or any special particular interest in it?
I have. I actually completed an advanced diploma of local family, advanced diploma of local family, and applied, isn't that terrible? I've got a blank. I've had training at UNE. And I've also got a Bachelor of Historical Inquiry and Practice. And I actually have been studying for a decade or more, actually the death culture. And I have the death culture as in on the Central Coast. So the attitudes and responses that occurred during the early part of colonial times to about 1920s. So it was natural for me to actually be attracted to the war memorials as well, because I do them, and also honour boards. But at the moment, for the past several years, I've been researching another significant memorial on the Central Coast. And because of this person that's been studying, this architect, I've realised a lot. I've researched so much about the War Memorial Advisory Boards and what was required during the time. So that is my background, and so I'm able to understand now why memorials were placed where they are, and because it wasn't just a haphazard thing for most of them. What happened straight after war, they were becoming a bit sloppy in sort of, it was a phenomenon that went around Australia, and they weren't being very sophisticated in putting some up. Some were looking really awful. So the government stepped up and implemented a state advisory board so that we'd get more uniformed ones and have them looking respectable, and that they would be honoured, and it was important for them to do. Oh, and I'd also, actually, my husband's just passing me a note here saying, and I actually had to, I did a conservation course in Canberra to be able to clean memorials and headstones and things like that. So that was quite an eye-opening experience, and I really enjoyed it a great deal. So that's my background in research. I've done a lot of research on the Central Coast, particularly with cemeteries, historic ones like the Henderson Cemetery at Saratoga, the Veteran Hall, they call it. Many people get that mistakenly called Veterans Hall. It's actually without an S, it's Veteran Hall. So I know all about the people in that little cemetery, lots of cemeteries all around the coast. And personally, my background is quite extensive and goes a long way back here on the Central Coast, as my ancestors actually were living along the Hawkesbury and Wollombi and, you know, the Rimba, not a Rimba, but in the 1800s, early 1800s, we're down in Hawkesbury and all through Mangrove Creek. And then my other side, my mother's side actually also came here in the 1880s, and they're the Dennings from Matcham, actually, in the 1880s when they were market gardeners. So I have a long history with the Central Coast.
And you're certainly qualified to talk on the subject, and they don't just let anybody restore war memorials these days. We do have a couple of questions that have popped into the chat. So one from Andrew, he says, thanks Merril and the library staff, so thank you for that. Amazing presentation. What was the lady's name that made the large red poppies in Poppy Park? So
Margaret Erling was the lady that made those poppies.
Okay, so Margaret Erling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And Lynn's popped a question in as well. Is there any more information online? Are patterns available to make a mini memorial here in the United States of America? So that's from Lynn from the USA.
Oh, that's lovely. Actually, when I did the Poppy project, I actually put on YouTube an easy pattern for school children. So if you look at Poppy project, easy school pattern, you'll see the pattern that I made. It is quite simple. You just have to watch the stakes as you drag the thing up, and you don't get splinters, because you can get splinters. I got one the other day.
And they are, I mean, I've made a few of the poppies myself, and that once you get the hang of them, yeah, you get into a bit of a routine. Just got to make sure the elastic bands are not too old either.
What's important too with the rubber bands, because you don't want them too long, and so there was specific green ones I had. It's pre-stretching it that will help, and it was lovely the other day because I actually went down to the Legacy home in Gosford and got the ladies to make these poppies, because they mentioned, oh, had we known about those, we would have made those. So they made a few, but they found the rubber bands a bit difficult. But I actually went down and showed them, and, you know, was stretching it as I went, and they went, oh, okay, that's much easier. So pre-stretching helps.
Yeah, and I can remember when the storms came through at Gosford soon after those poppies went in, and we all went, oh the poppies are going to go. But
Yeah,
they're amazingly resilient and strong, which is a bit like, people in wartime as well too. They are resilient.
absolutely.
We have a lot to be thankful for with the Poppy Project, and a lot to be thankful for you, Merril, for organising it for so many years for us on the Central Coast.
Oh, thank you.
Are
Just
there
for that lady that was Lynn, that was wanting the poppy thing, my assistant here has just passed me his phone and said that if you look up how to make a poppy suitable for school-aged children, you will see the pattern, and it lists what to do. YouTube. Yep, YouTube. There you go.
Okay, I'm just going to, how to make a poppy, simple poppy.
Gary, how to make a poppy suitable for school-aged children. I'm pretty sure that was it. Yeah. We'll send a link to you, Kathy.
I'm just typing in that one, how to make a poppy suitable for school-aged children on
YouTube.
There you go.
That made it easier.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, if you just pop that in there, they are, and I mean, even some of the little kids have made paper ones with paddle pop sticks and things, and put them in their gardens at preschool. So
Oh, that's nice.
you do see lots of different designs, but certainly the one that you've used is one that seems to work really well for a lot of the projects and a lot of the uses that you've used them for.
And I deliberately chose the material that was waterproof, which was like our shopping bags here in Australia. Lynn, I'm sure Lynn has them over there too, where it's waterproof material. So it was a no-brainer for me to use that material so that it wouldn't be affected by rain.
Yeah, they do deteriorate after a while, but certainly long enough for the display to make an impact. Why the Poppy Project, Merril? Why choose that one? Was this part of something bigger?
Well, as I mentioned, the Poppy Project was really more about me unearthing that poem by Ellen Martin, and it just really resonated with me, as in I had a son, 5 years off that age, and he would have been able to go to war at the time, and it really just was a powerful poem. I was actually researching at uni phlegm, Campbell, to be honest, and I got mesmerised by this poem. And what was really beautiful about the whole situation was I ended up meeting wonderful family members of the Martins. And actually the little girl, this is an interesting side issue, was the little girl that was on the paper in amongst the poppies. They made contact with me, and she was a descendant of the Martins, and I just made such beautiful connections with that. Interesting for history, you've got to be so careful with researching history and getting reliable sources. And when I saw that little newspaper clipping, and it's got a beautiful picture of the little Martin girl in there, and on the same page, the reporters had gone to a family descendant of the Martins, and so there was a fellow with a photo of what he thought was Cyril Henry Martin, but it actually wasn't. I'd say, I don't know what's happened in their family. Maybe one of his family members actually liked this fellow or something, and it's been in the closet, and they've assumed that it's Cyril, but it was some other Matcham lad. Because when I actually did a big history on the memorial, each soldier on the honour board at Matcham, and found out that this other fellow belonged to it wasn't Cyril Henry Martin. So it was just interesting. You've got to just be so careful with, even I'm thinking in 100 years when they see that paper, they'll go, oh, that's Cyril Henry Martin, but it's not.
Exactly. And so with your projects and your research projects, are they available for people to access anywhere?
It's interesting. Some I've done for the council before. I actually have just got them here, and I've really got them myself at the moment. But one day I'll get them out to other people. I've done a beautiful history actually. There's a lone headstone at Saratoga, and I've gone really in depth with that one and actually traced the families where they lived of the two boys that died in where they died. In that there was two boys, but only one's up on the Saratoga Hill, far from where he died, and it's that's an interesting history. So I have a lot of histories. At the moment, I'm researching another significant memorial, and that's actually something that I really actually wanted to be doing a master's with, because it's actually a significant piece of Australian history that's here on the Central Coast that nobody knows about. That's my next project.
Oh, so we look forward to finding out a little bit more about that. What would you like people to take from the Poppy Project and from visiting the Poppies?
Well, I really started this Poppy Project to never forget the sacrifices, and it was really humbling for me to, because I like being out of the spotlight, as you mentioned before. I actually really am quite private, and it's actually been a lovely way for me to see the reactions of people, because I can go to the Poppy projects and people don't know who I am. And so when I went to Gosford, I was just overwhelmed by the responses of people. You know, there was a man on a walker that was in tears, and when we were putting the poppy nets together at Erina Fair, there was an ex-service personnel that came up and found me out through all the other ladies that were helping and the men, and he just said, "Thank you for doing this. Nobody ever does something this significant to acknowledge what we sacrifice." And I said, well, that's what this project's all about, and I want people to take away a sense of, you know, appreciation too for what others are doing for us. So that's pretty simple. Remember the sacrifices and be grateful to their services. So.
Oh, that's a lovely message to come out of that, and hopefully we'll get that word out there, and hopefully the Poppies will allow us a little bit of time to reflect on those people who've done such great things for our community and for the Central Coast, and who have made that sacrifice, and we won't forget the sacrifices. Yeah. So as the theme for Remembrance Day, which is coming up next week, is remember them. And yes, you know, we will remember them. So, and I think that's an important thing. So one last question from me, and if anybody else wants to jump in and ask a question before we finish up, feel free. What's next for you?
Well, it's getting back to doing the research on my architect of a local memorial. That's really important to me. I've been able to connect with his family now, and they're quite amazed at what I've uncovered and researched for them. So they're eager for me to continue and bring that to fruition. So that's where I'll be heading to now with my research at the moment. But no more poppies planned, except for perhaps this one in a few years' time, this architect's memorial. I might come out of the woodwork to do that one.
Well, we look forward to that, and I'm sure you'll do brilliantly with your research and anything else you put your mind to, because you managed to galvanise a community to make those beautiful displays. And
that was important to me, actually, because as a little girl growing up here, we had such a community spirit, you know, and you know, we all knew each other, or lots of us knew each other, and in different parts of the coast, and I could see that it was a bit fractured a bit, and that's why I wanted to have an event that would get us all together again and be an inspirational event for us to come together and unite with.
And you certainly succeeded. It was beautiful. Yeah, you got that.
Thanks.
Well, everyone, that concludes our presentation for today. I'd like to extend a great, big, warm thank you to Merril for joining us here and sharing her story. It's wonderful. The poppies are on display at Gosford, as Merril said. Please remember to be socially distant and COVID safe should you wish to visit them. And I'm sure that you will enjoy the display. And if you're interested in any other online events, please visit the Library What's On page or join our library Facebook groups. We do have a history one, so that's a good one to jump on in and join so you can get info. And thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time, and take care, and thanks, Merril.
It's a pleasure. Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Bye.